When I first started listening to This American Life, when it started, it was so singular. I mean, you were doing something that nobody on radio was doing. But even when you listen now to All Things Considered, you know, the idea of the storytelling, I mean, the style and form you really created has influenced the more conventional news on public radio, don't you think?
Like that was always there. There's a very deep strain in public radio to have a kind of storytelling thing happening. Like when I put the show on the air, I thought like, well, you know, every day on the daily news shows on NPR, there's some story and you can't get out of your car and you just get caught up in the people. And I was like, well, somebody should just make a show that's just that. Like that's the stuff we all love. Like that's the stuff you want to listen to the radio for. And I really thought that like, well, I better get to this idea fast because if I don't, somebody else is going to. It's such an obvious idea. And in a way, like that's what the show is. And then I think there are a couple things in the style of the show that made it sound so different than other things on public radio. The fact that I narrate it the way that I do, where I'm trying to sound exactly the same way that I sound when I'm talking and not like a radio presenter. And then the fact that we think of the show as an entertainment, like that's built into the premise of the show, that consciously when I started the show in 1995, the premise was public radio was already good at being timely and analytical and giving you the news and doing all these things, very, very solid. And what we want to do is we want to take the smell of broccoli out of the air. Like you will listen not because it will make you a better person and a better citizen, but you will listen because it will be it will be an entertainment.
Right. So I've been listening to a lot of your shows going back to the beginning and trying to figure out what it is. Why is it so distinctive, what you do? And one of the things is it's not just that you're colloquial and informal, but especially early on, you're always saying, here on a radio show, I think some music would sound good now. You're sort of talking about the show while you're doing the show.
Oh, that's so interesting. And then we just kind of stopped doing it. It's like that kind of ended, didn't it?
That self-consciousness sort of disappears, but it's still somehow
that's
there in the background.
True. There's a lot of it. That's right. Like in the early episodes of the show, I'm constantly like playing tape and I'll stop it and I'll say, I'm just going to stop the tape right here. And let me talk about this. Yeah, it's true. And I think, I don't know. I just think I get tired of that. Like that wasn't a thought out thing. It was just sort of like, I've done that a lot of times.
But it's sort of, you have this self-conscious style, and I thought it worked very well in the show because you're sort of expressing a certain amount of indecision, anxiety, questioning of what you're doing while you're doing it.
I think a radio show is better when the presenter, when the reporter exists as a person.
Yeah.
You know, and like I feel like then there's more to listen for.
Well, I think there's a sort of autobiographical dimension to your show, right? You know, where you've had episodes where you've talked about, you know, ex-girlfriends, where you talk about your feelings about being Jewish. I mean,
and
you
my
just
parents,
talk about your parents. Your first show, you call your mom and ask her, give her advice about starting
Honestly,
the show.
Like that was one of the most surprising things of doing the show is that when the show started, I was coming off of like 15 years with my parents of things being kind of chilly between us because they opposed me being in public radio.
They wanted you to be on commercial TV.
Commercial TV / doctor. If I could be a doctor and also be on commercial TV.
It's interesting you kind of raised that, but that was kind of chafing against your parents' expectations, and that way was ultimately really good for you. Like if you'd had super liberal-minded, permissive parents who just said, go, follow your bliss, do whatever you want, you wouldn't have gotten
I think it's
far.
very apt. Also, like I was sort of blessed with the only, like my parents are the only Jews in America who hate public radio. And I think if they had been listeners to public radio, it would have made it much harder for me to want to be in public radio. Like they did not listen. And in fact, I mean, they came around. I just somehow like both for them and for me to like include them in this thing that was like the most important thing going on in my life at the time. Like I ended up feeling so much closer to them. And they eventually, because the show is a success, thank God, they eventually stopped telling me to go to medical school. But that was really...
What episode would that have been about?
Well, it was definitely after our first year. They formally said, it's okay, you don't have to anymore. To promote something, I was on Letterman. So it was a few years in.